All right, JJ, accumulation strategies. We're moving on, we're advancing in our whole dynamic here. I guess just give me an overview of what you're talking about when you're talking about accumulation strategies.
Well, really, I guess the key point here is that there is a big difference between making money and building wealth. You see, I have people all the time that come to me, they say, all I need is I need a raise. If I could have more income, then all of a sudden everything will be great. Well, I tell those people, there's no amount of money that you can make that you can't outspend. And some people say, well, I'd like to give it a shot. Sure you would. But I've seen people that they said, okay, my goal is I just want to have, if I could have $1 million, everything would be great. And I've seen people say, if I just had $10,000, that'd be great. Well, look at winners of the lottery a lot of times. What happens is that maybe they win millions of dollars, all of a sudden it's all gone. It's the same thing with our paychecks. Many people will have good paychecks, but then they just spend it all because they get caught up in the artificial wealth trap. And once they get caught up in this trap, it's very hard to make the escape. That's why I teach people my overall wealth escape concept. The accumulation part is something that it's a long term. Create is more short term. We've got to have our velocity of money. We've got to have money coming in where we're able to basically prime the pump, put the fuel into the engine. The thing is, with this overall accumulate, what we're talking about is long term. To build meaningful wealth, not only do you need a overall wealth plan, you need a retirement plan in addition to that wealth plan.
To continue your vehicle analogy here, you're talking about the maintenance plan on the car to keep it running is what you're talking about.
That's right. Make sure that it's taken care of, that it can get you to where you want to be, and that now you're set.
How hard, you said this is long-term. Accumulation is much more of a long-term mindset, a long-term plan. How difficult is it for people to get into that mindset, for people to think 10, 20, 30 years or longer?
You know, I've seen a wide variety of responses to everything. There are some people, to me, it's just like a fitness program. When you start looking at it, you can say a physical fitness, this is a fiscal fitness, because we're talking about financial. When you deal with this, a lot of times people, they don't see immediate results. They don't see immediate huge amounts of cash in their bank. They say, big deal, I saved $1,000. You know what, $1,000 is a lot of money. It's a good start. $1,000 can soon become $2,000. $2,000 can soon become $10,000. 10 can become 100, and so on and so on. Key is you've got to get started. Most people say, what difference is that going to make? Well, it's going to make a huge difference, especially when you factor in the compounding growth.
Well, when you're talking about accumulate, I mean, I can see what you're saying in some of this, but I mean, why do you think people get sidetracked sometimes? And what is it that pulls them off of the exercise regimen, the fiscal exercise regimen?
I think a lot of it is society as a whole. I think the media in particular. You know, I was watching television the other night and a commercial came on. And it was funny to me because I looked at it and you could see the wife over there watching television, and all of a sudden she's flipping channels. She says, all right, you win. We do need a new television set. And then it zooms in on the husband, and it's as if he's just been given the greatest news of his life. I mean, his eyes light up, and all of a sudden he says, yes. And then all of a sudden they start playing in the background. This music says, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, and I want it now. And then he goes into the store, and it has all these big screens laid out for him. And he's just looking at it like a kid in a candy shop, just in wonder, with awe, just going, oh, and it's playing this theme music, almost like stadium rock. And the key was, you can buy this, all you have to do is put it on your card. And I don't remember if it was Visa or MasterCard or whatever it was, but all you have to do, you can have all of this, you can have it now, and that's the key, the now. Well, guess what? As soon as he goes and gets that new television set, and I'm not beating up on the television set, I'm saying the whole point of that commercial was put it on your card. Nobody ever says, go write a check for that. Withdraw funds out of the bank and go pay for that. It's borrow against the future for immediate gratification. That's the challenge, because we're bombarded with those things, because that's what I want. I want this new car. I want this new television set. I want this new piece of equipment. I want this new piece of technology, and they don't want to put it on hold. They want to have it, and they want it now. And that's where they never accumulate anything, because all their money that they had set aside to accumulate all of a sudden is gone, so it never gets a chance to build up.
One of the things that I've seen a lot of people stumble with too are these high interest credit cards or some of these high interest loans that they get into, and the fact that they can't get out from underneath, that cycle of just even making minimum payments. I got an offer in the mail the other day, no lie, it sounded like the best thing since sliced bread, with all the exclamation points and everything they're offering, at only 21.8% interest.
Wow.
Annually. And I was like, I am getting a credit card offer that's bragging about 21% interest. I mean, you see this day in and day out.
Well, you think about it, a lot of times people say, you know what, I'm willing to do that because I want it right now, and okay, but the thing is, they look at it and say, well, I'm not going to have to pay that much percentage of interest because I'll pay it off. That's annual interest. There's no way it's going to take me a full year. I'm just going to, sock aside the money. But if they had the discipline to sock aside the money to pay things off, they wouldn't be having to buy a lot of this stuff on credit. When you look at it, people will get drawn in with these introductory rates, and then that causes them to put it on a credit card that they think they're going to pay for, rather than paying it off at the end of the month, which I have no challenge with credit cards. I think they can be great tools. However, that's where we get into our calculated expenses, where you want to make sure that you're expending your money on things that are important and things that can produce income. By borrowing money, now you've dug yourself the worst possible hole. You're borrowing to get things now that you're going to be working to pay off in the future. After all of the emotional, basically the part that's fun about everything, after all the shine has worn off on this new thing, you're still paying it off. That's why people aren't able to accumulate.
All right, let's talk about some of the accumulate strategies. Look at some of them in depth. Let's come back, and I want to ask you some more in-depth questions about them as we go along.
Great.
Strategy 1. Establish a wealth accumulation mindset.
The first step in any endeavor should be to get yourself in the right mindset. One of my favorite quotes is, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. Getting yourself in the proper mindset is the believe in that quote. Once you are mentally ready for a task, achieving it will seem a much smaller hurdle for you to overcome. The wealth accumulation mindset looks to the long-term building of wealth. A proper wealth accumulation mindset looks into your future and determines ways in which the cash flow that you have today could be put to work building your future for tomorrow. The wealth accumulation mindset will help you work to ensure that your future lifestyle is the one that you want, not the one that you have. I like to say that you should live like no one else so that you can live like no one else. In other words, the wealth accumulation steps that you take today impact your wealth and your lifestyle, not only for today, but also for years to come. Getting into the right mindset is a big step in the right direction.
Strategy 2. Set your investment objectives before you invest.
One of my favorite strategies is to plan your work and then work your plan. Before you invest the very first dollar, you should always ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish with this money? Without setting investment objectives, you could make the wrong investment and ultimately not accomplish your goals. Things that you may need to consider include, will you need access to your investment money as an emergency fund? How long can you invest this money or these assets before you need them for your budget or for reinvestment? What kind of return would you like to see on your investment? How much are you willing to risk? Are the invested assets necessary for your current operations, or is this discretionary cash? You may even have multiple goals for investment capital. For example, if you want money to reap financial rewards now, but you need some of the excess cash to use for future investments, then this must be taken into consideration when choosing your investment strategies. These piggyback investment strategies can be complex and iffy at best. You can't always rely on one investment to pay for another, and no investment or investment strategy is guaranteed. But by setting specific investment objectives, you can have a clearly defined path upon which your investment money can travel.
Strategy 3. Increase your wealth plan workforce.
Increasing your workforce means to put more things to work than just yourself. As an employee of a company, you are earning a salary, but you're also making money for your employer. You are part of that employer's workforce. From a business standpoint, if you aren't doing something that makes money for your employer, you probably won't have that job very long. You need to consider accumulating your wealth in the same manner. When considering which assets to keep or which new ones to add to your asset list, you need to bear in mind which assets will continue to produce income for you both now as well as over time. Those assets can become your workforce that will act as an employee for you, the employer, to continue to build your wealth. As with a business, if an asset costs you money or doesn't bring in income for you, you need to really think about that asset as part of your overall wealth plan. You can ask yourself if the asset really fits into your goals and if it will help you to achieve those goals. The asset may be important enough to you to keep it even if it isn't producing income, but you definitely want to weigh the pros and the cons of your assets in your wealth plan workforce when deciding on which assets to keep and which ones should be reemployed elsewhere.
All right, this is a recurring theme with us, JJ. Every time that we start down a different track of something that you need to do to advance and improve your situation, it always starts with a mindset. So let's talk about this mindset that you have to have for wealth accumulation.
You know, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, the first thing I will do is I'll start with the end in mind. And the reason I do that is I say that's a very easy to apply, and it's a good process to start with the end in mind and then work your way backwards. I've just had some of my most effective projects that I've done. I basically started those in that manner. Well, it's the same way when I'm talking with somebody about their finances or their retirement. I'll say, tell me what you want your retirement to look like. And they'll say, well, we picture being on the beach or living on a lake or doing some of these things. I say, okay, tell me about where you'll be living. What type of house is this going to be? Okay, and then I work back with it and I say, okay, that's going to require this much money to have that house paid for. Okay, or there's going to be some ongoing expenses. How much are those ongoing expenses? How are you going to get around? You're going to have a car. Okay, how much is that car going to cost? What's the ongoing cost of this? Then we come to a number that says, in order for you to have the lifestyle that you tell me that you want to have, here's what it's going to take to finance that lifestyle. Well, when they look at that number, they say, okay, maybe we can scale back a little bit. And I say, why would you want to scale back? Right now, when we're starting with the end in mind, let's talk about what it is you want. See, unfortunately, people will retire, and rather than living the life they want, they live the life that they have to live. And I say a lot of times there are two retirement scenarios, what I call golden years and golden arches. You know, and that golden arches is basically, there are two components to that. You're either going to be eating at McDonald's or, even worse, you may be working at McDonald's. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at it, that's what happens to a lot of people. I have nothing against McDonald's. I love McDonald's. It's a great company. When you look at it, when you ask the founder, Ray Kroc, what business he was in, he said, I'm in the real estate business. And I love that aspect of it because he knew something about building wealth. Well, it's the same thing here. We start with the end in mind. The mindset has to be, where do I want to go? Now I can formulate a plan, a strategy, a system, a method, a way of getting there.
One of the other things that you advocate in strategizing on this wealth accumulation is, what do you want to accomplish with the money that you're saving? And what you've talked about in terms of people picturing their retirement or their big ideas, that's obviously what we're focusing on. But how hard is that for people to envision what they want to do?
Well, see, that's where I start with the end in mind. If I can take away all of their self-limiting beliefs and say, you just tell me, if you had your ultimate druthers, I mean, if time, effort, energy, money, and the support of everybody was there for you, what would your life look like? And they say, wow, And then I can really get the truth. That's when I can say, okay, now you've told me what you want, I can tell you how to get it. But the key is, you've got to tell me what you want. Then when they're able to do that, now I scale back and say, here's what it's going to take. A lot of people, that's when they say, oh, maybe I need to adjust my wants. I say, no, don't adjust those wants here. You should want that. You should want to be able to enjoy your retirement. Now let's just focus on how we're going to get there. You're going to have to change some things right now so that you can have that down the road. The biggest challenge that we have is that people are taught that you can have whatever you want, you can have it right now. That's what the whole artificial wealth trap is all about. Because when you look at it, people say, I want it now, and if all I have to do is get a credit card, even if I'm paying that 21% interest, as long as I get it now, that's the key. They think that's what's going to give them their happiness. What they find out all too often is that that doesn't equate to happiness. It may equate to very, very just really difficult situations. And I hate seeing that. That's why I do what it is that I do, so I can help them.
You talked too about some investment strategies where people may piggyback on some different things. Kind of explain a little bit more in detail what you mean by piggyback investment strategies.
Piggybacking is basically where you're basing one transaction in the future on this transaction right now. I say, those are iffy at best. Because what you're saying is, okay, I'm basing this deal on what I'm making on this deal. And see, unfortunately, people are borrowing against tomorrow to pay for today. That's a lot of what the piggybacking is all about. They say, oh, but I'll pay that back. Unfortunately, they just dig themselves a deeper hole all the time. And they say, oh, but the money is going to come in here, because they think, okay, well, things will keep going. I've looked at real estate keeps going up, up, up. The stock market keeps going up, up, up. Well, if you look today, as it goes up, it still comes back down. That's what happens, but because people have not seen those things, they don't have that experience, they think that everything's going to be great forever. When I get some of my more mature clients, they've seen some of the dips. They've seen some of the even crashes. They've seen recessions. A lot of the people that I work with and a lot of what I see out there in society as a whole, it scares me to death, because I say people are horribly ill-prepared for retirement. Those people are still going to be around. What are we going to do to take care of them? I say we've got to teach them the strategies so that they can take care of themselves, so that we're not going to be taxed to death, literally taxed to death, to the point where even when we die, we're going to keep paying more and more taxes. That rate's going to keep getting higher if we don't do something about it to change the situation. You've got to change the behavior if you want different results.
All right, another thing that you talked about that I found very interesting is that you're talking about, collecting assets, accumulating assets, letting these assets work for you. You mentioned that you might keep some assets even if they're not income producing. That seems a little counterintuitive too, that you would hold on to something that's not really benefiting you.
Well, the reason I have to do that is that a lot of times I've got some clients that I'll tell them to do something and they say, okay, I'll do 60% of what he tells me, but the rest I'm just going to do my own. And then I have some clients that if I tell them something, they do it verbatim, word for word, 100%. And I say, well, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that you were supposed to go out and sell that family heirloom that has been passed down. You may have certain family heirlooms that maybe they don't have the greatest monetary value, but they've got maybe a sentimental value. And for those things, I don't want people to say, well, I've got that, it's sitting out there, let me just sell it. If it's got that type of a value, you need to capitalize on that value.
All right, JJ, also tell me too, you talked about increasing your wealth plan workforce. I'm a small business guy. Are you talking about me having to hire a whole bunch of more people here to get some work done?
Well, that's what's funny, because a lot of times when I talk about increasing your workforce, people say, all right, that's what's holding me back, period, is I'm having all these employees, I'm having to deal with these issues that are associated with employees. What I mean by increasing your workforce is that you need to increase your income producing assets. If you think about it, most people are their only income producing asset. I mean, when they wake up in the morning, the only way that they're going to make more money is to go to work and put in more hours. Well, what I mean by basically increasing your workforce is the money that's in the bank, it needs to be generating more money for you. Rather than you being the only income producing asset, let that be making money for you. Let's say you've got real estate. If you've got rental properties, now your tenants are essentially part of your workforce because they're paying your bills for you. In the stock market, if you've got basically stocks or other assets that are generating income or basically increasing in value, that's as if somebody is working for you. So now you've got more than just yourself working to build your overall wealth.
All right, you got other strategies? We want to pick your mind on those as well. Let's take a look at what you've got to say before we come back.
Strategy 4. Understand stocks, bonds, and money markets.
When it comes to investing your money, you really need to have at least a basic level of understanding of just what it is that you're investing in. Major mistakes have been made and fortunes have been lost when investors just put their money into an investment without really knowing how that investment vehicle actually works. Major money can be made in stocks, bonds, and money market accounts. In that same vein, major money can be lost in them as well, especially when you don't understand what it is that you're getting yourself into. Even beyond actually facing a loss in an investment, you may be faced with unexpected situations, such as having your money tied up for a certain period of time in a certain type of investment. If you need that money for living expenses, or you come across a better deal in another type of investment, you may find that your cash is unavailable to you or unavailable without substantial penalties until the time period is up. Understand that I'm not saying that you need to become an expert in trading the stock market or in securities or in commodities or bonds, etc. This may be something that you decide to do, but becoming an expert isn't essential. But you really must have at least a basic level of understanding of the risks and the characteristics of each type of investment you decide to become involved with.
Strategy 5. Understand real estate investment concepts.
Real estate is one of the hottest investment tools around, and there are almost as many ways to invest your wealth in real estate as there are people investing in it. But all too frequently, I see clients who have made major mistakes by venturing into real estate investments before they truly understood the deal that they were getting themselves into. Like any other investment vehicle, you need to have, at minimum, a basic level of understanding of the type of real estate deal you're getting involved with. Coming into a real estate investment blindly is just asking for unforeseen problems to arise. Real estate can be a highly profitable venture with many strong benefits for those willing to put their money into the deal. Real estate investing can also be confusing, and for the uneducated, it can be very costly and risky when entered into incorrectly or with unreasonable expectations. When investing in real estate, you need to educate yourself on a number of issues. What are your risks? What return can you expect to receive? When can you expect to start receiving that return? How much of your time, both initially and on an ongoing basis, will you need to put into this investment? If this investment no longer suits you, can you get out of it, and how do you get out of it? Answering these types of questions before you take the steps to make that investment is crucial to your investing success. Do what it takes to understand just what it is that you're getting into.
Strategy 6. Understand risk.
A crucial part of any investment or investment strategy is to understand what is at risk in the investment, how much is at risk in the investment, what those risks are, and ways to minimize or perhaps even overcome those risks. Knowing what assets are at risk in the investment is vital in assessing the overall risk of the venture. These can include how much is at risk. Are you just risking your time? If so, how much time are you risking? Could that time be better spent somewhere else? How much cash or other capital is at risk? Is it worth the rate of return you expect to receive? If the asset is too precious to you to risk, don't get involved in the deal. Identifying the risk to your investment assets and determining ways to minimize or even overcome those risks should be done well before any cash or assets have changed hands or any contracts or agreements have been signed. Knowing the enemy or the risk is an absolute must in the investment battlefield. If there are ways to minimize the risk, you must ask yourself, is the investment worth the extra steps? Only by arming yourself with the understanding of the threats to your investment can you make an educated decision on whether or not that investment is a good deal for you and for your financial future.
All right, JJ, some great stuff in those three segments right there. But let's talk about understanding risk first, because I think that is really the critical key for people to understand where their risk threshold is before they do some of the things that you're talking about doing. Should you have butterflies in your stomach when you are pulling the trigger on some of these investments? I mean, should there be some element of risk, or should it be fail-safe in your mind?
You know, I think that having the butterflies is always a healthy thing. You know, I do a lot of public speaking, and sometimes I'll talk to people right before I'm about to go on stage, and they'll see me kind of bouncing around or maybe having little nervous tics or different things that they'll kid me about, and they say, my goodness, as many times as you've gotten up to speak to a group of people, you mean you still get a little nervous? I said, sure I do. Because, I mean, I think that's a healthy thing. If I ever lose that, then that's when I'm going to know it's time for me to retire, kind of, you know, decide this, I'm done. I like the fact that I get those butterflies because that's what kind of gets you excited. It's the same way when I get into a real estate deal. Because if I'm not excited about the deal, I mean, why do it? When I find myself excited, I get a little bit of butterflies in there. All of a sudden I say, okay, there's a little bit of risk here. Now, I don't want to have those butterflies to where they turn into ulcers because all of a sudden I'm just worrying myself sick about this particular deal. If you've got a deal like that, life's too short to be involved with something like that. You don't need to be doing that because part of this overall plan is to make your life more enjoyable, not less.
So there is a difference between taking a risk and being really nervous, is what you're saying.
That's right, because what I found is that knowledge can help you minimize your risk. Because when you look at certain things, I tell people a lot of times the crocodile hunter. You've heard me talk about this in different times when we've been together. The crocodile hunter, he had experience and expertise of how to handle snakes, how to handle crocodiles. Well, sure, what he was doing was very risky, but he had lowered the risk from if I were to go out there and say, there's a snake, I saw the crocodile hunter pick up that snake, maybe I'll do the same thing. Well, as we know how that turned out, as unfortunately as it did, sure, there's always risk. And there's nothing that says by having the knowledge you will eliminate that risk, but you will minimize the risk. And that's the key. You minimize the risk by having knowledge.
Well, and maybe this will be a nice segue into talking about stocks and bonds and some other types of financial investments that you can make. But should you almost adopt a Warren Buffett style type attitude towards your investments? He knows something about fried chicken, therefore he invests in KFC or Taco Bell. He knows something about insurance, therefore he has investments in insurance. He knows something about railroads, so he invests in railroads. Doesn't get into the stuff that he doesn't understand. As a matter of fact, I think I read somewhere that Warren Buffett didn't take some of the risk with some of the internet investments that a lot of people did, and some made big money and some lost big money because he didn't get how it all worked.
I think that's definitely the case because you look at it, if you don't understand it, and see, I tell people a lot of times, I think there are two diseases or maladies that people suffer from. One is the paralysis of analysis. And what happens is that they just want to learn everything there is to know, and until they feel like they're experts in this area, they're not going to do anything. Well, those type of people, a lot of times, they never get to that requisite knowledge level, so they just do nothing. They're paralyzed by going through so much of analysis. That's the paralysis of analysis. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the desire to acquire. And that's what people suffer from at times when they say, I don't know what I'm going to buy, I just want to buy something. Well, that leads them into getting into things they don't know about because now they're trying to get into speculative, risky investments just because they want to make more money. That's not what we want to do. We've talked about things like that. I just want to make sure that people stay clear from that. There is a fine line between saying, I want to be an expert in this and I just want to have some knowledge. I'm not telling people that they have to be experts, but I'm saying you've got to have at least a core base level of understanding.
How do you help them find that point, though, that tipping point of comfort that I know enough and I'm not on the other side of the equation?
Well, I've had clients that have worked with me and they've said, I don't know what I need to do, just set it up, handle it all for me. And I said, that's not really how I work. Before I do anything for somebody, I want to make sure they understand what it is that I'm doing. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want you to set up a revocable living trust for myself and for my family, I say, hey, I applaud you in your decision. Let's talk about why you want that. Because I wanted to make sure that they understand what they're doing and more importantly, why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of times that people say, I don't know, I heard that was the thing I ought to be doing. That's not a good method of making your decisions. Your decision-making process, you should go through an actual process, gather information. Well, if you're gathering information, now you can make a much more informed decision because you have something to base that decision on. That's why I say you've got to at least have a good understanding of the type of investments that you're going to get involved with.
Another thing that you're talking about doing is understanding real estate investment concepts. Real estate's kind of a risky place to be these days. I mean, there is a lot of potential for financial loss in real estate these days. Very tricky times. On the flip side, a lot of opportunity as well. So how do you get up to speed in understanding some of these concepts that you're talking about?
Well, see, the biggest mistake that I see people make is that they go out, they hear that all this money is being made in real estate, so they go out there and they just say, okay, great, I'm going to go buy this property. Well, what do you know about that property? I'll ask these people, I'll say, well, did you do comps for the area. Find comparable homes, what those houses have sold for, how much per square foot. Is this made out, is it a brick home whereas all the other ones are brick, or is this a drive-it home where it's kind of that stucco type that maybe there have been lawsuits on? Because you may find yourself in trouble with something like that. Why is this house selling for the price that it's selling? You've got to do your due diligence, as it's referred to. We've got to make sure that you've done at least enough to know about the deal that you're getting into and understand that, see, there are people when they factor in a lot of, here's what I think I'm going to make on this property, I see a lot of times they haven't factored in closing costs. Closing costs can add up to a big chunk of what your profit was. If you look at it and you say, okay, well, I thought I was going to make a 10% profit. Say, okay, did you factor in anything for your real estate agent's commission? Oh, I didn't do that. Well, guess what? That's going to be a big chunk of whatever you had allotted as your potential gain. Did you factor in case the house doesn't sell? Well, I hadn't really done that because I just figured it would sell because houses have sold in this area for an average of this market time. Okay, well, you've got to factor all of these things in, and you've also got to have kind of a cushion. A lot of times people don't have that cushion, kind of their margin for error. They think, oh, there's going to be no error. Well, there's always going to be something, some surprise that pops up, and something that may rear its ugly head. You've got to be prepared for those things. That's why you've got to have the knowledge when you go into it. It's sometimes the best knowledge can come from experience, but it's also the most expensive.
All right, we've got some other investment strategies we want to get your thoughts on. Let's watch a few of them. We'll be right back.
Strategy 7. Keep the minimum required balance in your checking account and the rest of your cash in a money market or other interest-bearing account.
One of the keys to rapidly accumulating wealth is to make certain that your money is working for you instead of you working for your money. Even small steps can add up to big rewards in the future and shouldn't be overlooked in your overall plan. Step back and look around you for small changes that you can make to help you to accumulate wealth. Check with your banking institution to determine if they have a checking or savings account that can help you earn interest without a bank surcharge. Make certain you ask about the minimum balance required for these types of accounts. It may not be worth the interest earned to keep your extra cash in this type of account. Your money could be better invested elsewhere if you don't need it right away, but you'll never know until you look into it. The important concept here is to take lots of small steps to improve the effectiveness of your wealth accumulation plan. Remember, the biggest avalanche is made up of billions of tiny snowflakes. Each small step that you take in building your wealth is another snowflake in building your wealth avalanche.
Strategy 8. Contribute to your retirement plan now. Don't wait until later.
According to statistics, Americans aren't saving anywhere near enough money for retirement. Retirement is something that we all like to dream about doing sooner rather than later. Our actions, however, tell me that we really don't want to retire at all. What I mean by that is that we certainly aren't doing anything that would help us to retire early. We're just thinking and dreaming about it. Well, that alone won't work. The sad thing is that a retirement plan is one of the most powerful ways available for the accumulation of wealth. Unfortunately, many people just aren't taking advantage of it. Why is a retirement plan so powerful? Well, it's because it can take advantage of two of the most amazing concepts in investing. Those are, number one, the power of compound interest, and second, tax-deferred growth. In a tax-deferred or tax-free retirement plan, your money grows at an almost exponential rate since taxes aren't being taken out of the earned interest. This has astonishing potential. The reason that more people don't take advantage of this is because it doesn't provide immediate results. Most people see retirement as something far off in the future. Unlike creditors calling about current bills or deals that can be put together to make money within a relatively short period, many see saving for retirement as something that they can put off until tomorrow. Unfortunately, they don't see that tomorrow will be here much sooner than they may expect. They may not realize that by not investing in a properly structured retirement plan, they missed out on one of the most powerful wealth accumulation tools available. Don't let this happen to you. Do it now, not later.
Strategy 9. Make your own retirement plan if your employer doesn't have one.
For most people, the concept of accumulating wealth in a retirement plan is hands down the most powerful wealth accumulation tool available. There are two reasons for this. First, retirement plans give the opportunity for compounding growth. Second, an investor's money can grow tax-deferred or even tax-free until they actually take it out of the plan. These two concepts provide a turbocharged environment for the accumulation of wealth. For some of you, an employer-offered retirement plan may not be an option, or it may not provide enough savings for your retirement needs. Since our goal is to retire wealthy, multiple retirement plans are a great method for helping you to achieve that goal. Retirement plan specialists can work with you on setting up your primary retirement plan or additional plans so that you can put your wealth building plan into action. But since the compound interest can't start accumulating until you have the retirement plan funded and in place, every day you delay could add months or even years to you reaching your retirement goals. A retirement plan is truly an investment in one of the most important aspects of your life, your future. Making the decision to invest in yourself is a huge step on the road to financial independence.
I love this one particular strategy that you're talking about, and that is just being smart about your money in your checking account. You know, making some of that money that you're putting in there and you're keeping a little cushion in there for you, making it work for you. I mean, give me more details.
Well, see, you know, in my business, I've had times where I look down and I say, wow, we've got a lot of money sitting in this account, and guess what? It's not earning any interest. You say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe we need to set it up, see what alternatives we have at the bank. Maybe there's a sweep account where it'll have a certain amount that stays in our operating account, and then the rest will sweep over into an interest-bearing account. Maybe that's not going to be an enormous amount of money. Maybe it's not going to be a great percentage return, but bottom line is generating something rather than just sitting there stagnant doing nothing. Well, it's the same thing for many people. They've got all their money sitting in this particular type of account. Well, it may be a passbook savings account. They don't hardly even have those anymore. But you look at it, it may just be a regular savings account that's paying just very minimal interest. They may have it in a CD. They may have it in some other money market account that's earning just moderate interest. Well, that's better than no interest at all. However, at the same time, you may want to put it into maybe a mutual fund. You may want to put it into something that may be a bit more risky, but can also be much more rewarding. Once again, you've got to have the knowledge of what you're getting yourself into. You don't want to put your life savings into something that's going to be highly volatile.
This is just smart, though, simple business practice, though. I mean, this is just making a few extra pennies because 2% here, 2% here, 3% here, it all adds up in the grand scheme of things.
That's right. And you know, what's so interesting about what you just said, I take that as a compliment. When people say that this is just basic, smart money management, I say that's exactly what it is. See, I've been beaten up sometimes where people will say, you know, you just gave us a bunch of common sense. Well, as they say, common sense is not so common. That's why people find themselves trapped in this artificial wealth trap. They find themselves living paycheck to paycheck. It's because they never took the time to learn that common sense, basic knowledge, those core strategies for money management. They weren't taught these strategies. Those strategies weren't passed down to them from their parents. They were left on their own. They just did what they thought they were supposed to do. Unfortunately, people look around, they see, well, what's everyone else doing? If everyone else is doing it, maybe it must be right. Well, they find out how wrong it was a bit too late.
I want to talk about maybe setting up your own retirement plan. Perhaps you're self-employed, or maybe your employer doesn't offer a retirement plan, or maybe your employer does offer a retirement plan, but you want to do something a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more within your risk capacity. I'm going to give you an opportunity, but only this one opportunity, to talk about your favorite subject, and that's compound interest. So talk to me about some of the vehicles that exist out there and some ways that you can help set yourself up for your retirement goals financially by acting on your own.
Well, you know, it amazes me that first part of that, you know, you are right, that's my favorite thing in the world is compounding interest, compounding growth, because the great thing about it is that I just set it in place one time and it keeps working for me. While I'm asleep, it's working. While I'm on vacation, it's working. While I'm out playing with my kids, it's working. The great part about that is that I don't have to work as much. Well, that's the type of thing. That's what I call working smart, is what you can put your money where it's working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 on leap year. That's what I love. Even that extra day, it's working for me. Well, it's the same thing when you do this with a retirement plan, but the greatest part of this is that you get to, when the money that you put in there is deductible in most instances. The thing that kills me, blows me away, is that I see people who are working for somebody else who has a retirement plan that they offer. Maybe it's a 401k plan where they're going to match a portion of it. What they mean, that's free money. Basically, your employer is telling you, if you'll put this in here, I will match it. Maybe they won't match it dollar for dollar, but what if they matched it 10 cents on the dollar? Think about that. That's an enormous return right there. You didn't do anything for that other than make the decision, yes, I want to build wealth. It's the same way when it comes to doing this for yourself, where you say, okay, I want to take some of my money, put it into an account that can grow. Sometimes the money that you've got with your retirement plan at your employer, if you have one, maybe it's not going to provide enough for what you want to do. And that's where when you work with the end in mind, you say, okay, if I want to have this type of lifestyle, I need this amount of money. In order to have this amount of money, I need to be stocking aside this much per month. Mm-hmm. Plan your work and then work your plan. I say it all the time, and I continue to say it again. When you have that compounding interest working for you, it is truly magical.
A lot of opportunity too for you to take advantage of deferred compensation, and a lot of people they don't even think about this, but this is basically where you don't have to pay taxes on this money. It works for you too, and you don't have to feel it before it can come out of your paycheck if you're working for someone else. Talk to me a little bit about that concept and how smart that is to incorporate into this retirement and accumulation strategy.
Oh, it's just anything that you can do, and I mean anything that you can do to lower your tax obligation legally, lower it legally, and to be able to put that into an account that's growing with compounding interest. That is truly an amazing money secret. Now, I use that term secret because I guess if you were to define secret, it'd be something that is not known, something concealed. Well, this information is not concealed. It's not unknown, but in practicality, you would think it's a secret because nobody's acting on this. When you can learn the mastery of these money management concepts, you're going to see that it's not a matter of if you can ever become a millionaire, it's a matter of when, because you can make it happen. The key is you've just got to employ these strategies, and you've got to employ them now rather than waiting until it's too late, because people think, I'll do that later. Later comes sooner than we realize.
A lot of people think, when they think about a retirement plan as part of this accumulation strategy, they think about whatever exists at the big corporation or the company that they work for. How difficult is it to find other vehicles out there, to create other vehicles out there to do this type of IRA, 401k, things that are pretty traditional, but you wouldn't think of doing them on your own?
Well, it's extraordinarily simple. I mean, it's as simple as going into your bank and asking someone there at your bank about it. It's as simple as going into one of the brokerage firms and asking them about it. They're there, they have it. A lot of times people mistakenly believe that, well, I can't even set one up unless I've got thousands of dollars to fund the thing with. That's not the case. You can start with a very minimal amount of money, and that minimal amount of money can add up to a big overall chunk, especially down the road. It's very simple. All you have to do is go into your bank, go into the brokerage firms, ask about doing this. This is something that we provide. So if for whatever reason, you haven't gone into your bank, here's what I say a lot of times. People will say, I talked to my banker, and my banker said, all he shared with you was common sense stuff. Or their attorney said, oh, well, that's basic. Here's the thing. I ask people a question. If it's so basic, if it's so common sense, why didn't they share it with you? Well, there are two reasons. Number one is they didn't know about it, which if it's so basic, that's probably unlikely, but it's possible. Or number two, they did know about it, they just chose not to share it with you. Neither one of those is positive things. If they chose not to share it with you, why not? Somebody's managing your money who chooses not to share these strategies with you. Why on earth would you have your money with that person? You have to do what it takes to make your money grow. You can't depend on that person bringing you the information. You've got to go out and get it.
Well, and I think also to my point is it's intimidating for people. They think that they can't do it. It scares them. It intimidates them. They think that you have to have a high finance degree, that you have to, like you said, have thousands of dollars before you can even walk in the door. It's not that difficult.
The whole point of everything that I'm doing is to take this information and bring it to the masses. You know, I've had people that say, you know, really, your business model doesn't seem very good. I mean, if I were you, I would only focus on the ultra wealthy, because then you can charge that much more money and do that much. I say, well, sure, I can see why you would do that from a monetary standpoint, but who's going to take care of the other people? I look at it and I say, you know what? They need this information. If they're waiting for the government to do it, it's not going to happen. They're waiting for our school system to do it, it's not going to happen. That's why I've said, you know, you can be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. That's why I provide this information for people. Sure, I'll get beat up by people saying that's just basic. Well, if that basic information is not available to everyone and is not known by everyone, I'm going to do what I can to change it.
Well, and you know, only 1 or 2% of the population is what you call super wealthy anyway, so you got 98%. You got a much better audience to go after on that.
That's right.
More strategies to come. Stay put. Let's run through those. I want to come back and ask you some more questions.
Strategy 10. Learn and apply the secret of cash disgorgement.
Thinking like a business is a huge part of getting control of your finances and implementing the wealth accumulation mindset. By applying the strategies and principles that businesses utilize to your personal financial situation, you can accumulate wealth much more rapidly. One of the strategies that businesses employ on a regular basis is the secret of cash disgorgement. Cash disgorgement is simply the principle that large accumulations of cash in a business should be spent or reinvested. If your money is just sitting there, in the best case scenario, your money isn't truly working for you. Worst case scenario, you are neglecting the opportunity to reduce bad debt. You're missing out on investment opportunities or spending the cash frivolously on things that aren't necessities. Successful businesses often use cash disgorgement to counter these negative scenarios. These savvy business owners realize that their money needs to be put to work for them in one or another way. By moving the cash into a more lucrative investment vehicle or to minimize debt, they can use their surplus money in a positive manner to more rapidly accumulate wealth. Cash just sitting there in a non-interest-bearing account or even a low-interest account is not building meaningful wealth. In fact, it could even be counterproductive to their long-term wealth accumulation goals. To build wealth quicker, apply the secret of cash disgorgement.
Strategy 11. Use the 10% solution to go from paycheck to prosperity.
I can't tell you how many times I hear clients tell me that they have too much month at the end of their money. Every day when you turn on the news or pick up a newspaper, we hear the majority of Americans, now more than any other time in our economic history, are living from paycheck to paycheck, and that we are spending on average more than we earn. The more people listen to this rhetoric, the more helpless and hopeless they feel caught in this artificial wealth trap. Feeling helpless and hopeless can lead to apathy or even worse. People often just decide that there's nothing that they can do to better their situation, so why even bother to try? Or even worse, they may decide that they might as well go down in a blaze of glory and not only continue their bad habits, but actually make them worse. What the financial experts and reporters aren't telling us, however, is that there are simple steps that most anyone can take as individuals to lessen their financial burden and move from paycheck to prosperity. The first step in this plan is to take 10% of your income right off the top and pay yourself first. By paying yourself first, I mean invest this 10% in your future. Don't just pocket the money and go buy a big screen television. 10% may seem impossible if you're living paycheck to paycheck, but I'm telling you, it can be done if you put your mind to it and realize that this 10% is the cornerstone upon which to build your future prosperity. Remember, if you'll do what most people won't, you'll be able to do what most people can't.
Strategy 12. Put your wealth accumulation plan on autopilot.
The biggest favor that you could ever do for yourself is to put your wealth accumulation plan on autopilot. Some of you may have great discipline when it comes to saving money. Statistics show, unfortunately, that the vast majority of people don't have that discipline. They begin their savings programs with the best of intentions, but then an unexpected expense comes up, or an item that they just can't resist goes on sale, or they think that they'll use the money this week and promise themselves that they'll pay it back out of next week's paycheck. Whatever the reason, the result is that their wealth accumulation simply never happens. To overcome this, put your plan on autopilot. Once your plan has been put into place, you turn on the autopilot and it handles things for you. The temptation to spend your savings money is therefore eliminated because you never see it. Since you don't expect to receive it, it shouldn't figure in with your expected income. Believe me, this automatic plan has created its fair share of millionaires. The saying out of sight, out of mind definitely applies to this concept, and it's a powerful method to help you accumulate real wealth for an amazing retirement plan. The autopilot function in your autopilot wealth system takes the work out of your hands and frees you to tackle your daily concerns. When you're ready to access your accumulated wealth, your autopilot system will have helped greatly in achieving the smooth landing that all of us would like to have. Do what it takes to set it and forget it.
Cash disgorgement is one of the terms you're using in here. That sounds kind of grotesque. I mean, what is cash disgorgement? And make it sound better to me than it does.
Well, I tell you, it's interesting, that whole concept of cash disgorgement. You know, as an attorney, people think, all right, maybe he knows some information that other people won't know. And that's the case a lot of times. And what people find interesting is that my wife is a CPA. Well, in addition to having her CPA license, she also has a Master's of Business Administration, an MBA. Well, when she was studying for that MBA, I grabbed her corporate finance book one day. And I started thumbing through the corporate finance book, and I stumbled upon this concept called cash disgorgement. I said, I wonder what that is. And as I was reading a little bit about cash disgorgement, it was talking about how corporations, for instance, these large publicly traded companies, they'll do what they can. If they see that they're accumulating a lot of cash, they do what they can to get rid of it. Now, you talk about something that sounds strange. Do what you can to get rid of money. Why would you do that? Well, partly they didn't want to be a target of a corporate takeover or maybe a buyout. So that's part of why they would do it. They didn't want to have a lot of cash sitting around. But the next reason I found very telling. It said they didn't want to have a lot of cash sitting around because what they found was that the times that they made the most, I hate to say stupid, but I have to say stupid decisions, was when they had a lot of cash. You know, when they didn't have a lot of cash, that's when they acted the most intelligently. Well, it's the same thing as individuals. And I started thinking about that. I said, that makes a lot of sense, because if I've just cashed a check and I've got a lot of cash in my pocket, maybe at that checkout counter at the grocery store, or maybe at whatever store I may be going in, if I see something that's one of those impulse buys that's set up, you think to yourself, I got a pocket full of cash, big deal, that's $5. Or big deal, that's $20. Or for some people, they may say, big deal, it's $100. I've got that in my pocket. They tend to spend money in a different manner when they're flush full of cash than they would when they don't have that cash. Well, the concept of cash disgorgement is, okay, take a portion of that cash. Don't blow it, but take a portion of that cash, knock down some of your debt. Take a portion of that cash, knock out some of your house, the principal and your overall balance on your mortgage. Pay off part of your vehicle if you've got that financed. Knock aside maybe a chunk of a deposit into your retirement account. Bottom line, get that cash. It removes the temptation. And one of the greatest ways of overcoming that temptation is to just eliminate that temptation. If you don't have that money, now you're not as concerned about it. Put it into an account so that it's not sitting there burning a hole in your pocket, as the saying goes.
Yeah, I have to tell you, that is something that I actually do a lot. I hate having cash on me, because if I have it, I'm like you said earlier with your checkout counter analogy there. Some gum and some gas and a Coke, and pretty soon I'm like, where did that $20 go? I can't even account for it, so I definitely can relate to that. Let's talk about this concept of going from paycheck to paycheck instead to paycheck to prosperity. You mentioned that some people They get so down and depressed about their situation that they just decide to go out in a blaze of glory. You gotta tell me, there's a story there somewhere. You've certainly seen some people go out and do some pretty incredibly stupid things. Just one example, one illustration.
I tell you, in my line of work, working with as many people as I come across, what happens is I'll have some people that may be as reasonably prudent as you can possibly imagine, and I've got some people that are characters. And some of the characters that they say, you know what, I'm down to my last $1,000. I mean, and this is true. I've had a client in particular said, I'm down to my last $1,000. I'm going to Vegas. I'm rolling the dice, and I'm going to make it happen. And if I don't, well, I'll tell you what, I had a good time. So, well, let me tell you, as your attorney, as your financial, strategist that you're working with, this is not the best way of doing things. This is not going to be good for you. I don't see many positive outcomes. They say, well, you know what? That's the difference between the two of us. That's why you're there, and that's maybe why I'm where I am. But you know what? By golly, I'm going to have a good time with it. Well, we'll see how that works out. Actually, it's sad to say. I say sad. The worst thing that can happen to people sometimes is to make good money by doing that. I've had people that have done that. They say, you know what, I'm rolling the dice. I'm either going down hard or I'm coming back up. And they do that, and all of a sudden maybe they go to the roulette tables and they win. So then all of a sudden what it taught them was, okay, maybe I'll do that again. Well, in something like that, in that particular client's instance, going to Vegas, it worked out well for him. He won a couple $1,000, so then he said, hey, that's what I'm talking about. Now I'm ready to roll. Well, I don't know that that's a plan that I would ever advocate, but that's what people do. On the flip side, I've seen people that have been at those. I go to Las Vegas quite often. I see people that I say, that's just sad because they're there. There's a difference between being there to have fun with discretionary money that you have. It's another thing to say, I just got my paycheck. Here, I'm going to let it all roll. Yeah. I don't ever want to see people that get themselves in that position. That's why I work so hard to educate people to make sure they don't find themselves there.
Well, and what you're advocating is that just really, if you will try to play with 10% of your paycheck, just take 10%, which may seem like a lot to some people, but that still leaves 90% for some other, mandatory things and some discretionary things, but just 10%. How hard is it for people, once you really kind of spell it out for them, to see what 10% amounts to?
Well, when I first broached the subject with clients, they look at me like I'm crazy. They say, well, that's easy for you to say. 10%, do you realize how much money that is? And I say, yes, I do. Do you realize how much money that is in the long run? Because now we're not just talking about that 10% that may be blown. We're talking about that 10% that's now doing my favorite thing, compounding. So it's inside that account and it's continually growing. That 10% could become an enormous amount of money. However, they look at it and they say, 10%, I just can't do it. And I say, tell you what, I want you to try it. Just do it. And what I've found is that if you do it, it comes back into that motivation through obligation. Now you've committed yourself to that 10%. You'll find ways to get around this. That's what I've found is that people pretty soon, the most common response I get is, now that I've done that, I don't think about it anymore. That's where you want to be.
All right, JJ, and again, on this same principle, the same mindset here that you're talking about putting your wealth accumulation on autopilot. Tell me what you're talking about there, on autopilot.
Well, essentially on autopilot, it means you turn it over to where it's handled automatically. And here's where, when I tell you about the 10% that we just talked about, a lot of times if people had to physically write that check out every month for 10%, I don't think that they'd be able to do it as effectively, because now every month you see that, and then emotion comes into play. Once your emotions are involved, you think, well, this month it's December, it's Christmas. Or this month I've got the kids it's their birthday. And then this month I've got the family vacation. You start looking at some of those things and you say, I can't really set aside that 10%. Well, remove the temptation, as I mentioned with the cash disgorgement. If you remove that temptation, because now it's automatically set up through your bank, through your brokerage account, whatever it might be. I do this myself for my daughters. Automatically, every month, there's a set amount of money that goes into each one of their college funds. So now I know that it's put into their tax-deferred plan, that they're able to continually to build up money on a tax-deferred basis. Every month they get a certain amount. Well, that amount is not so high that I truly feel it, but it's enough that I say, okay, at the end of the year, I say, wow, I made a pretty decent contribution this year. Now I was able to do that and do it in a way that at the end of the overall time that I've set for this, when it comes time for them to go away to college, they're going to have a pretty decent amount of money where that college is going to be taken care of. It's the same thing. I also do this into my retirement account. I have a set amount of money that goes every single month into my retirement plan. And the reason for that is that here's the biggest challenge I see with retirement plans is that people will say, okay, I have until April 15th, maybe for a certain type of retirement plan to make my contribution. Well, the challenge is that then all of a sudden, if you're asking to write a check for $10,000 or even if it's $2,000, that can be a big chunk of money. Well, if it came out just gradually throughout the course of the year, now you find out at the end of the year, you say, wow, that $2,000 was automatically put into my account. I don't have to write that big check. I didn't feel it near as badly. Let's think about that. Why do you suppose that all these retailers out there want you to put the purchase on credit? Because now you don't even look at the cost of that big consumer item, maybe that big screen TV that was $2,000 because you're paying for it a month at a time. I'm trying to kind of turn the tables a little bit and say, let's apply that same concept to a retirement plan. It's automatic. You don't have to think about it. Now you're just automatically taking some money out of this account, putting it into that retirement account, takes it out of your mind, out of your control, which is the key thing, because now you don't have to think about, all right, let me every time write this check, because that takes extraordinary discipline. Most people don't have that level of discipline. You don't have to. You can do it, but just set it and forget it.
When are you going to retire, JJ?
I don't know that I'll ever truly retire. When will I be able to retire? It's going to be pretty soon. I'm going to be able to retire because I want to be able to do what I want to do, not what I have to do. And that's just, it's a different mindset. I look at it and I say, I'll probably never retire. I'll be the guy coming into the office. They'll say, the old man's here again today. You know, and you never know. They may say the old man's here when I'm 55 years old. But I hope to be going as long as I can, continue going into the office because I love what I do. Especially, you know, as I've talked about, I love sharing this information. The feeling that I get by seeing the looks on people's faces when they realize that they can do it. It doesn't give me a great deal of pleasure for people to say, wow, it's great what you can do. It's great when they tell me, thank you, because you've taught me what I can do. That's the difference. That's why I don't know if I'll ever retire. As long as I keep getting that feeling, I hope to be doing this as long as I can.
All right, JJ, great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise, and we've got more to come, I know, in some future visits.
Thank you.